In the small town of Ravenswood, nestled between dense woods and mist-covered hills, a gloomy mansion stood abandoned for decades. It was rumored to be cursed, and locals whispered that anyone who dared enter would never return. One moonlit night, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to challenge the legends. Sarah, Mark, and Emily gathered at the mansion's rusty gate. Their flashlights flickered as they stepped into the overgrown garden. The air was heavy with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of their footsteps on the decaying leaves. The mansion's windows were like empty eyes staring into the night. As they ventured deeper into the mansion, shadows seemed to dance at the corners of their vision. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, and whispers filled the air. Emily's flashlight suddenly went out, leaving them in darkness. Panicking, they heard a chilling laughter echoing through the halls. They followed the laughter to a room where a dusty gramophone stood, its needle moving on its own. The room was filled with old photographs, each showing a group of teenagers from different eras. The laughter grew louder, and the photographs started to move. The figures in the photos stepped out, their ghostly forms becoming more distinct. One figure, a girl named Lily from the 1920s, spoke in a hollow voice. "We came seeking adventure too. This mansion feeds on our fear, and now we are trapped." The other figures nodded in agreement. The teenagers realized they were trapped as well. The mansion began to warp and change, becoming a labyrinth of shifting walls and endless corridors. They were lost in a nightmare. Mark and Emily's faces twisted in terror, their fear becoming nourishment for the mansion's malevolent power. Sarah, however, had an idea. She remembered reading that cursed spirits could be appeased by solving the mystery of their deaths. As the mansion's walls closed in around them, Sarah discovered a hidden journal. It detailed Lily's tragic fate. She had been murdered by her jealous lover. With the journal in hand, Sarah confronted Lily's ghost. Tears streamed down her ethereal face as she read the words aloud. The mansion shuddered, and the echoes of Lily's laughter turned into anguished cries. As the last words left Sarah's lips, the mansion began to collapse in on itself. When the dust settled, the mansion was no more, and Sarah, Mark, and Emily found themselves in the moonlit garden once again. Lily's spirit stood before them, now at peace. "Thank you for setting us free," she whispered before fading away. From that day on, Ravenswood regained its tranquility. The legend of the haunted mansion became a cautionary tale, a reminder that some stories are better left unexplored. Story 2. In the heart of the Whispering Woods, an ancient forest known for its eerie legends, a lone traveler named Alex found themselves lost as daylight faded. The trees seemed to shift and watch, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Unsettling whispers surrounded Alex, seeming to come from every direction. With no other option, Alex followed a faint trail deeper into the woods, hoping it would lead to safety. But the path grew narrower and more overgrown, and soon, as though the trees were intentionally guiding Alex deeper into their midst. The air grew colder, and the whispers intensified, forming words that seemed to crawl into Alex's mind. As night fell, a clearing appeared before Alex, illuminated by an otherworldly glow. In the center stood a gnarled tree, its roots twisting like serpents. From its branches dangled silver threads, each one ending in a small, luminescent orb. Mesmerized, Alex reached out to touch one, and immediately, a surge of memories flooded their mind. They saw flashes of people lost in the woods, driven mad by the incessant whispers. The threads were a manifestation of the forest's dark magic, capturing the souls of those who had succumbed to its enchantment. Alex realized that if they didn't break free, they too would become a whisper in the wind. As the threads began to wrap around Alex's wrist, the whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, each one pleading to be heard. But Alex fought back, channeling their willpower and memories of loved ones to resist the forest's grasp. The threads recoiled, and the tree emitted an anguished wail that shook the very ground. With a final burst of energy, Alex severed the thread binding them and fled the clearing. The forest roared in protest, its trees contorting and writhing in fury. Alex sprinted through the darkness, guided only by the dim moonlight. Hours later, they stumbled upon the forest's edge and collapsed, gasping for air. The whispering woods had released its grip, but the memory of its haunting whispers would forever linger in Alex's mind. Story 3. The autumn winds carried a chill as the Harper family arrived at the long-abandoned carnival on the outskirts of town. The once vibrant rides now stood rusted and broken, and the faded banners seemed to sag under the weight of forgotten memories. Despite the warnings of the townspeople, the Harpers were drawn to the mystery of the cursed carnival. As they explored, young Lily found an ornate mirror hidden in the ruins of the funhouse. When she gazed into it, her reflection twisted into a nightmarish version of herself. A voice whispered from the mirror, promising her wishes in exchange for her family's happiness. Lily hesitated, but her desire to help her struggling family won out, and she made the pact. In an instant, the carnival came to life, its lights flickering on and rides whirring back to motion. The Harpers were delighted, believing they had stumbled upon a hidden treasure. However, the carnival's cheers soon turned sinister. Lily's parents grew distant and emotionless, their faces frozen in eerie smiles. The ride spun faster and faster, their music discordant and maddening. Lily's little brother, Timmy, was trapped on the Ferris wheel, his screams lost in the chaotic symphony. Lily realized the carnival was feeding off her family's happiness, leaving only emptiness in its wake. Desperate to undo the curse, Lily returned to the mirror, determined to break her pact. The mirror's voice grew sinister, promising that if she reneged, her family would suffer even more. But Lily was resolute. She shattered the mirror with a nearby iron bar, releasing a shockwave that tore through the carnival. The rides collapsed, the lights flickered and died, and the mirror's curse unraveled. As dawn broke, the once thriving carnival returned to its state of decay, as if the night of horror had never happened. The Harpers left the cursed carnival behind, forever changed by their ordeal. Lily learned that true happiness could never be bought at the cost of others' well-being, and as they drove away, the carnival's haunting tune played softly in the wind, a reminder of the darkness that had briefly gripped their lives. On a cloudy summer afternoon, four adventurous friends, Sarah, Jake, Emily, and David, set out for a day of exploration in the dense woods that bordered their small town. They had heard whispers of an old abandoned cabin deep within the forest, and curiosity drew them in like a magnet. As they ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew eerie, and the woods seemed to close in around them. The air became thick with tension, and the trees cast long, menacing shadows. Despite their unease, the friends pressed on, guided by the fading daylight. After what felt like hours of walking, they stumbled upon the cabin, its time-worn wood and broken windows exuding an air of malevolence. Ignoring the warning signs, they cautiously stepped inside. The interior was shrouded in darkness, save for the flickering light of a single candle on a dusty table. As their eyes adjusted, they noticed an old, ornate mirror hanging on the wall. Their reflections seemed distorted, as if the mirror held a secret of its own. Mesmerized, they watched as the candle's flame seemed to dance with an unnatural intensity, casting strange, elongated shadows. Suddenly, the mirror's surface rippled like water, and a chilling breeze swept through the room. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their unease growing into palpable fear. Before they could react, the candle's flame extinguished, plunging the cabin into pitch darkness. A haunting whisper echoed through the room, chilling them to the bone. "Who dares enter my domain?" it hissed. Panic gripped the friends as they fumbled for their flashlights, casting weak beams of light into the abyss. They gasped as they saw a pair of glowing, malevolent eyes staring back at them from the shadows. The demon revealed itself as a grotesque, shadowy figure with elongated limbs and gnarled claws. Its voice dripped with malice as it taunted them, recounting their deepest fears and insecurities. Paralyzed with terror, The friends could only watch as the demon drew closer, its shadowy tendrils reaching out to ensnare them. In a desperate bid for survival, Sarah remembered a piece of folklore she had heard from her grandmother. She recited an incantation, her voice quivering but determined. The cabin shuddered, and the demon let out an ear-piercing shriek. The mirror cracked, releasing a blinding light that engulfed the room. As the light faded, the cabin lay empty and still. The demon was gone, its malevolent presence lifted. The friends stumbled out of the cabin, gasping for air as they realized they had narrowly escaped its clutches. They never spoke of the cabin again, but the memory of the encounter haunted their dreams. The woods remained a place of darkness and dread, a reminder that some secrets are better left undisturbed. And whenever they saw their own shadows stretching in the fading daylight, a shiver of fear would course through them, a reminder of the demon that had tried to claim them. On a moonless night, the highway stretched like an endless ribbon of darkness before John, a weary truck driver hauling cargo across state lines. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. The road was quiet and desolate, the world outside his cab shrouded in an inky blackness. As the miles rolled by, John's eyelids grew heavy, and he fought to stay awake. He turned up the volume on the radio, hoping the music would keep him alert. But just as he was about to succumb to exhaustion, he saw a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. Braking instinctively, John peered through his windshield. A woman stood there, her silhouette illuminated by the truck's headlights. She looked lost, wearing a tattered dress that fluttered in the wind. Her long, tangled hair obscured her face, and her eyes glowed an eerie shade of green. John's heart raced, but a sense of empathy overcame his fear. He rolled down his window and called out to her, "Are you okay? Do you need a ride?" The woman's voice was soft and melancholic as she replied, "Please, can you help me? I'm lost and need to get home." Without hesitation, John unlocked the passenger door, and the woman climbed in. As she settled into the seat beside him, an unsettling chill filled the cab. Her presence seemed to cast a shadow, and John felt a shiver run down his spine. "Thank you for stopping," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the engine. John glanced at her briefly, his nerves on edge. "No problem. Where do you need to go?" She turned her head slightly, revealing her pale face and piercing green eyes. "Just keep driving, and I'll tell you when to stop." The highway stretched on, the darkness outside seemingly impenetrable. John's unease grew with every passing mile, the woman's silence unsettling. He stole glances at her from the corner of his eye, noticing that her clothes seemed to be rotting, as if she were trapped in a state of decay. After what felt like an eternity, the woman finally spoke again, her voice distant and haunting. "This is where I need to get off." John's heart raced as he slowed the truck to a stop on the side of the road. The woman's eyes bored into his, and a cold dread settled in his chest. Before he could say anything, she reached out and placed a cold, bony hand on his arm. "Thank you for your kindness," she whispered, her voice growing fainter. And then, in an instant, she was gone, as if she had dissolved into the night. John's breath caught in his throat as he looked around the empty cab. The woman had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a lingering sense of terror. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing with disbelief and fear. With a trembling hand, he put the truck back into gear and accelerated back onto the highway. As he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had encountered something otherworldly, a phantom hitchhiker who had momentarily crossed the boundary between the living and the dead. And even as the miles rolled on, the memory of those green eyes and the touch of that cold hand would forever haunt his nights on the road. Officer Emily Lawson patrolled the quiet, rural town of Redwood Grove, her cruiser's headlights slicing through the thick mist that blanketed the area. The town was known for its tranquility, but tonight, an unsettling tension hung in the air. Emily's instincts told her that something was amiss. A crackling voice came over her radio, dispatching her to a disturbance reported at the old abandoned church on the outskirts of town. As Emily approached the dilapidated structure, she was struck by an eerie feeling that seemed to radiate from its weathered walls. The church's windows were shattered, and graffiti covered its facade. Emily cautiously stepped inside, her flashlight revealing the remnants of a ritualistic gathering. Candles formed a sinister circle on the floor, and grotesque symbols were etched onto the walls. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and decay. As Emily continued her investigation, a noise echoed from the basement. Gripping her service weapon, she descended the creaking stairs. The basement was dimly lit by flickering candles, revealing a group of robed figures gathered around an altar. In the center lay a lifeless body, its blood staining the floor. "Police, freeze, freeze," Emily shouted, her voice echoing through the room. The cultists turned to face her, their eyes glinting with a malevolent fervor. The leader, draped in a crimson robe, stepped forward. His voice was chillingly calm as he spoke. "Welcome, Officer Lawson. You're just in time to witness the culmination of our sacred ritual." Emily's heart raced, her training urging her to call for backup. But she was outnumbered, and the cult's unsettling confidence unnerved her. "Step away from the altar and put your hands up," she demanded. The leader's lips curled into a sinister smile. "You misunderstand, officer. We are beyond the reach of the law now. Our covenant with the darkness is unbreakable." Suddenly, the room trembled as a low guttural chant filled the air. Emily's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Panic surged within her as she realized she was facing something beyond her comprehension. The cultists continued their chant, their voices growing louder and more fervent. Emily's vision blurred, and a wave of dizziness washed over her. She struggled to maintain her focus, her grip on reality slipping. With a surge of determination, she managed to convey the address of the church, hoping he would arrive in time. Just as Emily felt herself succumbing to the darkness, the basement door burst open, and Officer Daniels stormed in, his weapon drawn. The sudden intrusion disrupted the cult's ritual, causing the robed figures to scatter in panic. Amid the chaos, Emily and Daniels fought off the cultists, their bullets piercing the air. The leader, however, managed to escape through a hidden passage, disappearing into the shadows. Backup arrived, and the cultists were apprehended. The lifeless body on the altar turned out to be a victim, a gruesome sacrifice to their sinister beliefs. As dawn broke, the church stood as a haunting reminder of the evil that had momentarily taken hold of Redwood Grove. But even though the cult had been disbanded, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of a malevolent force lurking in the shadows. And as she gazed at the decaying church, she knew that the Devil's Covenant had left an indelible mark on her town, a reminder that evil can fester even in the most serene places. The Henderson family, Mark, Lisa, and their two children, Alex and Sophie, embarked on a road trip across the country. With the sun setting on a warm summer evening, they found themselves driving through a dense forest on a remote stretch of highway. Their car sputtered and died, leaving them stranded in the fading light. As darkness descended, Mark decided to hitchhike back to the nearest town for help, leaving Lisa and the kids in the car. He assured them he'd return as quickly as possible, and with a heavy heart, he disappeared into the woods. Hours passed, and anxiety gnawed at Lisa. She glanced at the kids in the backseat, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Sophie was too young to understand the situation, but Alex's worried expression mirrored her own. The forest seemed to close in around them, and the rustling leaves sent shivers down Lisa's spine. Suddenly, a flickering light appeared in the distance, growing brighter as it approached. Lisa's heart skipped a beat as a figure emerged from the shadows, illuminated by the light of a lantern. The woman wore tattered robes and a wide-brimmed hat, her face obscured by darkness. "Lost, are we?" The woman's voice was a lilting, eerie melody that seemed to echo through the trees. Lisa hesitated, her instincts warning her that something was amiss. Our car broke down and my husband went for help. We're just waiting. The woman's lips curved into a sinister smile, revealing a glimpse of sharp teeth. Ah, how fortunate for me to stumble upon such a lovely family in need. Come, little ones, step out of the car. Alex and Sophie clung to their mother, their wide eyes filled with fear. Lisa's heart raced as she felt an irresistible pull to obey the woman's command. She opened her mouth to protest, but her voice caught in her throat. As if in a trance, Lisa and the children stepped out of the car, their feet carrying them toward the woman. The forest seemed to shift and twist, the very air humming with an otherworldly energy. Lisa's mind screamed for her to resist, but her body refused to obey. The woman's lantern cast eerie shadows on the ground as she circled them. You see, I am a witch, and I've been waiting for souls like yours. The forest demands a sacrifice, and you are the offering. Panic surged through Lisa, shattering the enchantment's hold over her. She clung to her children, summoning every ounce of strength to break free. With the defiant scream, she backed away from the witch, her eyes blazing with determination. The woman's face contorted in fury, and the forest around them roared to life. Branches snaked down from the trees, forming a cage that encircled them. The witch's eyes glowed with an unnatural fire, and her voice rose in a chilling incantation. But just as the forest's magic threatened to consume them, a voice shattered the silence. Mark burst through the trees, his eyes wild and determined. He brandished a broken branch like a weapon, his voice ringing with power as he shouted incantations of his own. The air crackled with magic as Mark's counterspells clashed with the witch's dark incantations. The forest quaked, its ancient power surging between them. The battle raged on, the very fabric of reality twisting and warping around them. Finally, with an explosion of light, the witch's power faltered, and the forest's hold was broken. The cage of branches dissolved, and the witch screamed in frustration as she faded into the shadows. Gasping for breath, the Henderson family clung to one another, their bodies trembling from the ordeal. The forest returned to an eerie calm, as if nothing had transpired. Mark's hands were still raised, his magic dissipating as he took in the scene. We need to get out of here," Mark panted, his voice trembling. Without a second thought, they rushed back to their car, the engine miraculously roaring to life. They sped away from the enchanted thicket, leaving the darkness behind them. As the miles rolled on, the Henderson family shared a silent understanding of the horrors they had encountered. The memory of the witch's malevolent power would forever linger in their minds, a chilling reminder that not all forests are as they seem, and that some places hold secrets too terrifying to comprehend. Jeremy and Alex were ordinary high school boys, best friends who walked to school together every morning. Their route took them through a quiet suburban neighborhood, flanked by neatly manicured lawns and picturesque houses. It was a scene of tranquility, one they never thought would become a haunting memory etched into their young minds. One crisp autumn morning, as they strolled along the familiar path, laughter and animated chatter filling the air, they noticed a figure standing a few houses down. It was a man, his face obscured by a hood and his posture tense. Jeremy and Alex exchanged curious glances but continued on, dismissing the stranger as inconsequential. As they neared the corner, their footsteps muffled by fallen leaves, a chilling scream pierced the air. The boys froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They turned to see the man, now wielding a knife, attacking a woman who had been walking her dog. Horror gripped Jeremy and Alex, rendering them momentarily speechless. The woman's cries for help were agonizing, but they were also short-lived. The man's blade glinted in the morning light as it descended, ending her desperate pleas with a sickening finality. The boys watched in shock, their breath catching in their throats as the man wiped the blade clean and fled, disappearing down a narrow alleyway. The neighborhood that had once felt like a safe haven now seemed tainted by an unspeakable evil. Seconds stretched into an eternity as Jeremy and Alex stood frozen in place. Finally, their survival instincts kicked in and they turned and bolted, their sneakers pounding the pavement in a frantic rhythm. They reached the school, their hearts still racing, and they stumbled through the doors, unable to fully comprehend the horror they had just witnessed. Throughout the day, the weight of the morning's events hung over them like a dark cloud. They tried to act normal, joining their classmates in lessons and lunch breaks. But their minds were haunted by the woman's screams and the image of the man's cold, ruthless gaze. After school, they found themselves standing outside the police station, their hands trembling as they recounted the events of the morning to a detective. Their voices shook as they described the murderer and his chilling act, their eyes avoiding each other's as if to shield themselves from the shared trauma. Days turned into weeks as the investigation unfolded. The neighborhood became a hub of activity, with police cars and reporters crowding the once peaceful streets. Jeremy and Alex's friendship had deepened through their shared experience, but their innocence had been irreparably shattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, the boys were called to the police station to view a lineup of potential suspects. Their hearts raced as they stood behind a two-way mirror, observing the lineup in silence. Among the men lined up, one face stood out to them like a nightmare resurrected. The man they had seen that fateful morning was there, his hood pulled back, revealing a face twisted by malevolence. Fear gripped Jeremy and Alex, their fingers pressing against the glass as they tried to distance themselves from the murderer's gaze. After what felt like an eternity, they stepped away from the mirror, their minds reeling from the realization that they had come face to face with the embodiment of their worst nightmares. The police assured them that the man had been arrested and was awaiting trial, but the boys knew that the memories of that morning would never truly fade. Months passed, and the court proceedings became a harrowing ordeal. The boys were called upon to testify, their voices trembling as they relived the horror for a courtroom full of strangers. The defense attorney's questions were like daggers, probing their memories and attempting to cast doubt on their accounts. But despite the emotional strain, Jeremy and Alex stood their ground. Their testimony was unwavering, their voices resolute as they recounted the events of that fateful morning. The courtroom held its breath as the verdict was read, guilty. The man was sentenced to life in prison, but for Jeremy and Alex, the scars of that morning would never fully heal. They had become unwilling witnesses to a gruesome act, forever haunted by the realization that evil could lurk in the most ordinary of places. As years passed, they clung to each other, finding solace in their shared experience and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. The memory of that autumn morning remained a ghostly presence, a reminder that innocence could be shattered in an instant, leaving behind a legacy of horror and a determination to never forget. Daniel had just begun his part-time job as a pizza delivery boy. The small town of Crestwood was quiet and uneventful, making his job seem like a breeze. But one fateful night, an order came in that would forever change his perception of the night. It was a stormy evening, rain pelting against the windows of the pizzeria. The phone rang, breaking the monotony of the empty shop. Daniel answered, jotting down the details of the order. A large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese, and it had to be delivered to a remote cabin at the edge of the forest. The caller's voice was soft, but held an odd undertone, like a whisper carried by the wind. As he set out, the rain intensified, making the drive treacherous. The cabin's location was marked on the GPS, but as Daniel followed the winding path, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The forest was dense, the trees looming like shadowy sentinels. The cabin's isolation sent a chill down his spine. Finally, the cabin came into view. Its windows were shrouded in darkness, and a single flickering light glowed from within. Daniel parked the car and grabbed the pizza box, his heart racing in anticipation. He knocked on the door, and after a tense moment, it creaked open. A woman stood before him, her eyes dark and unreadable. She was young, with long disheveled hair that framed her pale face. She gave Daniel a cold smile, and he noticed a glint of something metallic in her hand. "Finally," she said, her voice like a melody laced with something sinister. "I've been waiting." Daniel's unease deepened, but he offered the pizza with a nervous smile. "Here's your order. That'll be $15.50. She took the pizza but made no move to hand over payment. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on him, her smile never wavering. "I have a better idea. How about you join me for dinner?" Daniel's heart pounded. The situation was growing stranger by the second. He forced a chuckle. "Sorry, ma'am, I've got other deliveries to make. If you could just pay for the pizza." Her smile widened, revealing a hint of madness. "Oh, but you don't understand. You're the main course, my dear delivery boy." Fear gripped Daniel's chest. He took a step back, his mind racing. The woman's intentions were clear, and the glint in her hand was unmistakably a knife. Without a word, he turned and sprinted back to his car. As he drove away, rain splattering against the windshield, he could feel her eyes on him, her presence like a lingering specter. He glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her chasing after him, but the road behind was empty. Breathing a sigh of relief, he focused on getting back to the pizzeria. He was ready to put the bizarre encounter behind him, but just as he thought he was safe, his car sputtered and died in the middle of the forest. Panic set in as Daniel realized he was stranded in the very place he had been desperate to escape. He grabbed his phone, hoping for a signal, but the screen remained stubbornly blank. With no other option, he stepped out of the car and started walking, the rain soaking through his clothes. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity as he stumbled through the forest, disoriented and exhausted. Every rustling leaf, every distant sound made him jump, his imagination running wild with the woman's sinister intent by some members of the Secret Service. Finally, just when despair was threatening to consume him, he saw a faint glow in the distance. Relief washed over him as he approached a small cabin, its windows warmly lit. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. A kindly elderly couple answered, their faces filled with concern as they saw his state. They invited him in, offering him dry clothes and a hot cup of tea. As he sat by the fireplace, the couple listened intently to his story, their expressions growing grave. "I've heard rumors of strange happenings in these woods," the old man said, his voice heavy with worry. "People disappearing, sightings of a woman who seems to be more than human." Daniel's blood ran cold as he realized his encounter was not an isolated incident. The old woman placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're safe here, dear. We'll call the police and make sure you get back home." As the police arrived and took his statement, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that the woman from the cabin was still out there, her dark intentions lurking in the shadows. He left Crestwood the next day, vowing never to return to the forest that had nearly claimed his life. Years passed, but the memory of that night remained etched into Daniel's mind. He often wondered if the woman was real or a product of his imagination, a manifestation of the darkness that could lurk within even the most serene places. And though he left the forest behind, he carried its secrets with him, a reminder that sometimes the most chilling horrors are the ones that hide just beyond the edges of our reality. In the quaint town of Elmridge, young Emily Thompson lived with her parents in a charming cottage that exuded warmth and comfort. But despite its inviting exterior, the house held a secret, a history of unexplainable occurrences that would forever alter Emily's perception of reality. One chilly winter night, as the wind howled outside, Emily was nestled under her cozy blankets, drifting into a peaceful slumber. But as the hours passed, her restful state dissolved into a terrifying ordeal. Emily found herself trapped in the grip of sleep paralysis, a phenomenon that left her unable to move or speak, a prisoner within her own body. Fear gnawed at her as her eyes remained fixed on her bedroom ceiling. She tried to call out for her parents, but her voice was trapped within her throat, muffled and weak. Panic surged within her, and her heart raced, trapped in a rhythm of helplessness. Then, something shifted. A strange sensation enveloped her, as if a sinister presence had invaded her room. Her gaze was drawn to the corner of the room, where a dense haze seemed to materialize. The air grew heavy, and Emily's chest tightened as her pulse quickened. The haze coalesced into a grotesque form, a creature that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Its limbs were long and sinuous, its body contorted in an unnatural manner. Its eyes glowed a malevolent shade of crimson, fixated on Emily with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. A surge of terror washed over Emily, her body trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. She strained against the invisible bonds of sleep paralysis, willing herself to break free. But her efforts were futile, and the demon's presence seemed to intensify, suffocating her with its eerie aura. With every passing second, Emily's perception of reality became more distorted. The demon's gaze seemed to penetrate her very soul, its silent presence a suffocating weight on her chest. She felt a rush of icy breath against her skin, and her mind reeled as the creature's thoughts invaded her own, a twisted amalgamation of darkness and despair. As the minutes stretched on, Emily's willpower began to waver, her mind weakening under the relentless assault of the demon's presence. She could feel its tendrils snaking into her thoughts, twisting her fears into horrifying visions. Images of loved ones in peril, nightmarish landscapes, and a sense of impending doom flooded her mind. But amidst the cacophony of horror, a flicker of resistance ignited within Emily. Clinging to a fragment of her fading strength, she focused all her energy on a single thought, the unyielding desire to break free from the demon's grasp. In a burst of determination, Emily summoned a surge of energy she didn't know she possessed. With a primal scream, she forced her muscles to obey, shattering the shackles of sleep paralysis. Her body jerked, and she sat up in bed, gasping for air, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The room was empty, the demon's presence dissipating into the ether. The haze had vanished, leaving behind only Emily's racing heart and the remnants of her terrifying ordeal. Trembling, she glanced around, confirming that she was once again alone. As the first rays of dawn broke through the window, Emily's parents burst into her room, concern etched on their faces. Emily recounted her horrifying experience, her voice shaky as she described the demon's chilling presence and the visions it had invoked. Her parents exchanged a knowing glance, and her father spoke gently. "Emily, what you experienced is known as sleep paralysis. It can cause vivid hallucinations and feelings of terror. Your mind can conjure the most unsettling images during that state." Emily wanted to believe her father's explanation, to find comfort in the idea that it was all a product of her imagination. Yet the memory of the demon's malevolent gaze lingered, its intensity and darkness defying any rational explanation. Days turned into weeks, and Emily tried to convince herself that the demon had been a manifestation of her mind's fear. But the haunting image remained etched into her memory, a reminder that the line between reality and the unknown was far more tenuous than she had ever imagined. As Emily grew older, she learned to cope with her fear, using logic and reason to combat the lingering shadows of that night. Still, there were moments when doubt crept in, when she questioned the nature of the supernatural and the depths of the human mind's potential. The experience left an indelible mark on Emily's perception of the world, and even as she went on to live a seemingly ordinary life, she carried the memory of the demon's crimson gaze, a haunting reminder that the boundary between the seen and the unseen could be shattered by the power of fear and the mysteries that lay beyond the veil of consciousness. In the heart of the vast Egyptian desert, the Pyramid of Khufu, the Great Pyramid, loomed with an air of mystery and ancient wisdom. It was here that Daniel Harrison, an adventurous archaeologist, found himself on an expedition that would forever alter the course of his life. Daniel's fascination with Egyptology had led him to pursue a career that delved into the secrets of the past. Armed with a thirst for knowledge and a boundless curiosity, he had joined a team of archaeologists who were granted rare access to the inner chambers of the Great Pyramid. Their mission: to uncover the mysteries hidden within its depths. The team, consisting of seasoned researchers and historians, spent weeks painstakingly navigating the labyrinthine passages of the pyramid. It was a laborious process as they inched closer to the heart of the ancient structure, driven by a shared passion for discovery. Daniel's heart raced with anticipation, eager to be among the first to glimpse the secrets concealed within the pyramid's core. One fateful day, as the team ventured deeper into the pyramid, they stumbled upon a previously undiscovered chamber. Its entrance was sealed by layers of sand and stone, untouched by human hands for millennia. The air was thick with a sense of anticipation as the team worked diligently to breach the chamber's barrier. As the entrance was finally revealed, a rush of stale air swept through the chamber, carrying with it a sense of ancient foreboding. The walls were adorned with intricate hieroglyphics, the faint remnants of a civilization that had long since faded into history. Daniel's heart quickened as he studied the carvings, his mind racing to decipher their meaning. The hieroglyphics told a tale of a malevolent entity, an ancient demon that had been imprisoned within the pyramid as a safeguard against its power. The text spoke of rituals and incantations designed to keep the demon's spirit dormant, its influence contained within the depths of the pyramid. But the carvings also warned of the consequences should the demon ever be awakened, a darkness that would engulf the world in chaos and despair. Despite the warnings, curiosity gnawed at Daniel's resolve. The amulet glowed with an otherworldly light, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe, the embodiment of ancient magic. As Daniel reached out to touch the amulet, an ominous sensation washed over him. It was as if the chamber itself held its breath, waiting to see whether he would heed the warnings carved into the walls. But Daniel's thirst for knowledge prevailed, and his fingers closed around the amulet. In an instant, the chamber erupted with a blinding light, and a searing pain coursed through Daniel's body. He screamed as the ancient magic surged through him, his senses overwhelmed by a torrent of images and sensations. He glimpsed visions of civilizations rising and falling, of battles fought and alliances forged. He felt the weight of centuries bearing down upon him, a relentless torrent of time's inexorable flow. When the light finally subsided, Daniel found himself standing in the midst of an ethereal realm that defied comprehension. The air was thick with an aura of malevolence, and the ground seemed to shift like liquid beneath his feet. Before him stood an entity that defied description, an ancient demon, its form shifting and undulating, a maelstrom of shadow and darkness. The demon's voice echoed in Daniel's mind, a symphony of whispered promises and insidious intentions. It spoke of power beyond imagination, of a world reshaped in its image where humanity would bow to its influence. Daniel's heart raced as he felt the demon's presence infiltrate his very thoughts, his will eroding under its overwhelming force. But amidst the chaos of the demon's influence, a flicker of resistance ignited within Daniel. He recalled the warnings etched into the pyramid's walls, the tales of destruction and despair that would accompany the demon's awakening. With a surge of determination, he focused his thoughts, seeking to break free from the demon's mental grip. In a burst of defiance, Daniel conjured memories of his loved ones, the faces of family and friends who held his heart in their grasp. He summoned the strength of his own humanity, an indomitable force that resonated against the demon's dark power. The demon howled in frustration as its influence wavered, its form contorting in an otherworldly frenzy. With one final surge of willpower, Daniel hurled the crystal amulet toward the demon, its light blazing with an intensity that rivaled the entity's darkness. The amulet collided with the demon, unleashing a shock wave that reverberated through the ethereal realm. The demon's form convulsed and twisted, its visage contorting as it let out a deafening roar. As the shock wave subsided, the ethereal realm shattered like fragile glass, and Daniel found himself standing once more within the pyramid's chamber. The amulet lay on the ground, its light dimmed but victorious. The demon's presence had been banished, its influence extinguished by the strength of Daniel's resistance. Exhausted but triumphant, Daniel stumbled from the chamber, his mind reeling from the encounter. He shared his harrowing tale with his fellow archaeologists, their eyes wide with disbelief and awe. The pyramid's secrets had been both a curse and a blessing, a reminder of the unfathomable mysteries that lay hidden within the annals of history. In the aftermath of the encounter, Daniel returned to his ordinary life, forever changed by the ancient demon's touch. The amulet remained a silent testament to his bravery, a relic of the darkness that had been vanquished by the strength of his will. And though the shadows of that ethereal realm lingered in his memory, they were tempered by the knowledge that even the most ancient of evils could be overcome by the resilience of the human spirit. The midnight encounter. Working the night shift at the gas station had become routine for me. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional sound of passing cars were my only companions in the darkness. But one night, a chilling encounter shattered the monotony, leaving me haunted by a presence I couldn't explain. It was well past midnight when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, expecting to see a weary traveler, but what stood before me sent a shiver down my spine. A woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her features obscured as if by a veil, gazed at me with haunting eyes. Her voice was a faint whisper carried by the wind as she spoke. "I'm looking for someone, a lost soul wandering in the night." Unease settled in as her words lingered. I glanced around, thinking there might be someone else with her, but we were alone in the station. "Can I help you find someone, ma'am?" Her gaze remained fixed on me, sadness etched in her features. "He promised to meet me here, under the pale moonlight." A chill ran down my spine, the air growing colder as her words resonated. "I'm the only one here right now." Her presence seemed to waver, a moment of vulnerability in her eyes. "If you see him, tell him that Isabella waits. Tell him to follow the path of memories and he'll find me." Before I could react, a strange sensation swept through the room, as if reality itself was shifting. The woman's form began to dissolve, fading into the shadows, leaving me alone with a sense of unease and confusion. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of the encounter. Her words echoed in my mind, a puzzle I couldn't solve. I felt watched, the shadows seemingly whispering secrets that eluded me. Driven by an inexplicable urge, I found myself in a nearby forest one night. The moon cast an eerie glow as I followed an unseen path, a mixture of trepidation and curiosity guiding me. In a clearing, there she stood, Isabella, the woman from the gas station. She faced an old gravestone, lost in thought. "Isabella," I murmured, a sense of recognition in my voice. She turned to me, her eyes conveying both sadness and gratitude. "You came." The pieces fell into place. Isabella was a spirit, searching for a lost love, her connection to the gas station, a link to the past. "He's waiting for you," I said gently, understanding dawning upon me. "He remembers and wants to be with you." Isabella's ethereal form seemed to brighten, a weight lifted off her shoulders. "Thank you." As I walked back to the gas station, I felt changed by the encounter. Isabella's story had transcended time, teaching me that some mysteries couldn't be explained. The line between the seen and the unseen was blurrier than I'd ever imagined, and her haunting presence would forever remain a part of my own story. Growing up, I had spent countless summers on my grandfather's remote farm. It was a place of warmth and cherished memories, a haven far from the hustle of city life. But one summer, an encounter with a malevolent force shattered the tranquility I had always associated with the old homestead. As I approached the farm, nostalgia flooded over me. The rolling fields, the creaking windmill, and the old red barn held a sense of comfort that hadn't faded with time. However, this visit would be different, an inheritance process after my grandfather's passing. The sun was setting when I arrived, casting long shadows that stretched across the land. Entering the farmhouse, air felt heavy, as if the walls held secrets. I set about sorting through old photos and relics, feeling a mix of melancholy and nostalgia. As darkness settled, I headed to the barn to gather some tools. The air grew chilly, and a sense of unease tingled at the edges of my awareness. Inside the barn, I heard a whispering. Sounds seemed to come from all directions. My heart raced, but I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks. Then I saw movement, a flicker of shadow at the corner of my eye. I turned, catching sight of a figure lurking in the darkest corner of the barn. "Who's there?" I called, my voice betraying my unease. The figure emerged from the shadows, and a cold fear gripped me. It was no person but a creature that defied description, a demon with eyes that gleamed like embers. Its voice was a guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through my very soul. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. I stumbled back, my heart pounding as I tried to comprehend the impossible sight before me. This was my grandfather's farm, a place of safety and cherished memories. It couldn't be tainted by such malevolence. "What do you want?" Choke out, my voice trembling. The demon's laughter was chilling, a cacophony that echoed through the barn. "Your family has secrets buried deep within these fields. I am their keeper, their guardian." My mind raced as I recalled the stories my grandfather had shared, tales of ancient rituals and a pact made with darkness for prosperity. It had always been a mere fable, a way to entertain a curious child, but the demon's presence shattered my skepticism. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed an old pitchfork, clutching it as if it were a lifeline. "You won't have me or my family." The demon's eyes glowed brighter, its laughter turning to a menacing growl. "You cannot escape the past, mortal. The pact must be honored." With each step I took, the creature's malevolent aura seemed to intensify. I held the pitchfork at the ready, my heart pounding as I faced a force that defied reason. As the standoff continued, a memory from my childhood surfaced, a story of my grandfather, a farmer who had once faced the same darkness that now sought to claim me. Gathering my courage, I muttered words of defiance, words my grandfather had once whispered to me. The barn trembled as if the very earth resisted the demon's presence. Its form wavered, its strength faltering. With a final surge of determination, I lunged forward, the pitchfork piercing the demon's shadowy form. A deafening shriek filled the air as the creature convulsed, its malevolence dissipating into the night. Breathing heavily, I stumbled back, the barn returning to a quiet stillness. The air no longer felt heavy, and the shadows held no secrets. I had faced the demon that had haunted my family's past, a confrontation that had finally broken the cycle of darkness. As dawn broke, I surveyed the old barn. The memories of that night would forever linger, a reminder of the horrors that could lurk beneath even the most cherished places. Yet, it was also a testament to the strength that resided within me, a strength that had been passed down through generations, a strength that had finally broken the grip of a malevolent force that had haunted my family for too long. Camping trips with my friends had always been a highlight of our summers. The laughter around the campfire, the thrill of sleeping under the stars. It was the perfect escape from the mundane. But one camping trip would forever alter the way I looked at the serene beauty of nature. We chose a remote lake deep in the woods as our destination. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, trading stories and sharing jokes. After hours of laughter and s'mores, we decided to take a late-night swim in the lake. The moon cast a silvery glow on the water, making it look almost magical. Stripping down to our swimsuits, we waded into the cool embrace of the lake. As we splashed and swam, there was something strange out of the corner of my eye. A ripple, followed by a movement beneath the surface. My heart skipped a beat and I turned to get a better look. The water seemed to shift and churn, as if something was lurking just below. "Did you guys see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. My friends laughed. I was joking, but I knew I'd seen something, a glimpse of darkness that defied the serene beauty of the lake. Brushing off my unease, we continued our swim, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the water held a secret, something sinister that only I could perceive. I tried to push the thought from my mind, attributing it to my imagination running wild. As the night wore on, we returned to the campfire, tired from our swim. The crackling flames offered a sense of comfort, but my unease persisted. Unable to shake the feeling, I suggested we play a game to distract ourselves. My friends agreed, and we began to play a card game, the laughter returning as we focused on the competition. But even as we played, I couldn't ignore the nagging fear in the pit of my stomach. Hours later, fatigue finally overtook us. We crawled into our tents, the sounds of the night surrounding us. But sleep eluded me. Every rustle of leaves, every hoot of an owl seemed to echo my unease. It was as if the very forest held its breath, waiting for something. Unable to take it any longer, I unzipped my tent and stepped outside. The moon bathed the campsite in a soft glow, and I found myself drawn to the lake once again. As I approached the water's edge, I felt a chill run down my spine. And then I saw it, a pair of eyes, glinting in the moonlight. They were dark and malevolent, staring up at me from the depths of the water. My heart raced, and a cold fear gripped me. I stumbled back, unable to tear my gaze away from those eyes that seemed to hold an evil beyond comprehension. A whisper brushed against my mind, a voice filled with malevolence. "You shouldn't have come." With a surge of terror, I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing through the silent woods. I dove into my tent, zipping it shut as if that thin barrier could protect me from the darkness I had witnessed. Morning came, and my friends found me shaken and pale. I told them what I had seen, the malevolent eyes that had stared up at me from the lake. They exchanged skeptical glances, attributing it to my imagination running wild in the darkness. But I knew what I had seen was real. That camping trip had shattered my perception of nature's beauty, replaced by the haunting image of those eyes that held a darkness beyond comprehension. And as we packed up our campsite and left that lake behind, I couldn't help but feel that I had glimpsed something ancient and evil, lurking in the depths of the water, waiting to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. It had been a long day at work, and the sun had already dipped below the horizon as I trudged my way home. The shortcut through the old graveyard was a familiar route, a path I had taken countless times. But on that fateful evening, I would come face to face with something that defied all reason. The air was thick with a sense of unease as I stepped into the graveyard. The tombstones cast long shadows, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a chill that settled deep within my bones. I quickened my pace, eager to be out of the unsettling atmosphere. As I walked, my footsteps seemed to echo through the silence, each sound magnified in the stillness of the night. But then, a new sound emerged, the faint shuffle of footsteps, as if someone was walking behind me. I turned, expecting to see a fellow late-night traveler, but there was no one there. My heart raced as a feeling of dread settled over me. I continued walking, my gaze fixed on the path ahead, trying to convince myself that it was simply my imagination playing tricks. But then I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps following my every move. Swallowing my fear, I forced myself to look around. My breath caught in my throat as I saw them, shadowy figures, ethereal and indistinct, moving among the gravestones. Their forms flickered like candle flames, their eyes glinting with an eerie light. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding as I watched the spirits. There was something unmistakably sinister about them, a darkness that seemed to seep from their very presence. They moved in a haunting procession, their movements slow and deliberate, as if they were in no hurry to reach their destination. A whisper seemed to brush against my ear, a voice that carried a chilling warning. "Bearer of the living, you tread upon sacred ground." I couldn't tear my gaze away from the spirits, their eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I felt as though I was being drawn into their world, a world that existed beyond the realm of the living. With a surge of panic, I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing through the graveyard. The spirits seemed to recede into the shadows, their presence lingering like a bitter taste in the air. I stumbled out of the graveyard, my heart racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I reached the safety of the streetlights, I glanced back at the graveyard. The spirits were nowhere to be seen, but the memory of their malevolent presence was etched into my mind. I had witnessed something beyond explanation, something that shattered my understanding of the natural order. From that night on, I avoided the graveyard at all costs. The memory of those evil spirits walking among the tombstones haunted my thoughts, a reminder that there were forces in this world that defied comprehension. And as I walked home, the feeling of being watched lingered, a reminder that the boundary between the living and the departed was more fragile than I had ever imagined. It was a stormy night, rain pelting against the pavement as I stood on the dimly lit street corner, desperately waving for a taxi. Finally, a cab pulled over, its interior bathed in an eerie glow from the neon signs nearby. Relief washed over me as I climbed into the back seat, eager to escape the downpour. The driver seemed normal enough at first glance, but there was something unsettling about his eyes, a coldness that sent a shiver down my spine. I gave him my destination, trying to ignore the sense of unease that settled in the pit of my stomach. As we began to drive, the atmosphere in the cab grew tense. The rain battered against the windows, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the growing unease that filled the air. The driver's eyes remained fixed on the road ahead, his grip on the steering wheel unnaturally tight. I tried to strike up a conversation to ease the tension, but his responses were short and curt. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized that something was seriously wrong. It was as if his eyes held a predatory glint, a darkness that was hidden just beneath the surface. As the cab sped down the rain-soaked streets, a feeling of dread settled over me. I glanced at the driver's ID, a futile attempt to ground myself in reality. His name was Mark, but that was little comfort in the face of the growing sense of danger that permeated the cab. I should have asked him to stop, should have demanded to be let out, but fear held me in its grip. The rain fell harder, the world outside becoming a blur as we raced through the night. My heart pounded in my chest, the instinct to flee warring with the paralyzing fear that held me in place. And then I saw it, a glint of metal, a flash of a blade hidden beneath the driver's seat. Panic surged through me as the truth became clear. I was trapped in a cab with a psychopath, a man who meant me harm. My mind raced, searching for a way to escape, to survive. As the cab slowed for a moment at a red light, I made my move. With a surge of adrenaline, I flung open the door and leapt out into the rain-soaked street. My heart raced as I stumbled to my feet, my eyes locked on the cab as it sped away, its taillights disappearing into the night. I stood there, rain drenching my clothes, gasping for breath as a mixture of relief and terror washed over me. I had escaped, narrowly evading a fate that I could hardly comprehend. The rain continued to fall, washing away the fear and leaving me with a newfound appreciation for the fragility of life. As I walked away from that nightmarish ride, the memory of the psychopath taxi driver would forever linger, a reminder that danger could be lurking in even the most ordinary of situations. And as the rain washed away the remnants of that night, I couldn't help but feel that I had been granted a second chance at life. A chance to escape the clutches of a darkness that had come dangerously close to consuming me.